All right. Hello, everybody. It's Mr. Whalen. I am here with Jordan Synnestvedt. And we have a great opportunity here to listen to Jordan's story and tell her a little bit about a really interesting career. So she's going to take some time and share a little bit about her background, her career path, her experiences, and then also we'll get into some marketing specific things. So probably in total, maybe around 30 minutes, and then I'll have some questions for you guys to answer at the end. Okay. So Jordan, if you want to get us started, introduce yourself, and then if you want to tell us a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, great. So hi, I'm Jordan Synnestvedt, as Mr. Whalen mentioned. Yeah, so I graduated from Glenbrook South in 2012, so a handful of years ago now. And I'm currently the senior industrial designer for a company called Creative Works. And what we do essentially is candy packaging for the top brands like Hershey, Wrigley Mars, Ferrera, Nestle, all those good ones. And I specifically am in that design realm within that, designing the structural packaging, designing the look of it, the feel of it, all the, in my opinion, the fun stuff. Um, yeah, right. So that's sort of what I'm doing right now. I was going to say I can let you go into some more specific questions
Yeah.
about what exactly I'm doing, but
Well, I think
that's the
I think a
brief
good
elevator pitch.
yeah, I think a good segue to that is you say the fun stuff. Uh, behind, could you go into that a little bit more and I
Yeah.
guess explain why you would refer to what you do as quote unquote the fun stuff?
Yeah, yeah. No, that's a good question. So I would call it the fun stuff mostly because it's just my passion. Design has been something I've always had an interest in. Art specifically, I went to Glenbrook South with a heavy focus in the arts department over there. Um, so it's always been something that's excited me. Specifically working with my hands, 3D design and art has been really exciting for me. So I went to college and pursued that, and now I'm sort of seeing it happen in the real world, and it's part of my day-to-day life, and that's fun for me. So I think really when I say that, it comes from a sense of passion around what I do. Um, and it's
That's good.
creative. It's exactly what you would imagine in
Mhm.
terms of creativity and brainstorming and kind of working things out and playing. So
I think it's also too. It's the part of the of any business really that the consumer sees. A lot of
mhm.
times they don't see the behind the scenes stuff of the actual making of the candy. Uh,
Yeah,
it's fun for them to look at a new candy wrapper package or uh, a new way to present something. Uh, could you talk a little bit? We're going to get into a little bit more about market research, but
yeah.
can you talk about the consumer's perspective of things as you get into this idea of industrial design?
Yeah, so you mean consumers' perspective of like purchasing or like what they see on shelf and all that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I'd say, well, this is coming from my perspective of what a consumer sees, and so it's a little bit of a, you know, um, yeah, I mean, as a consumer, when all of us are consumers, we go to the store, we shop, we look around for what we might need to buy, what we might want to buy, what might be appealing. There's a lot of factors that surround us as consumers and what it is that we purchase. And we like to understand that consumer and what it is specifically with candy. Candy's not a necessity, but it's something, again, we'll bring up fun, something kind of fun and lighthearted about candy. And we like to understand what it is the consumer is paying attention to in that realm when they're purchasing. Are they looking for something that's bright and shiny, something that's really big, something that maybe is the right price point, something that's affordable? I think there's just a ton of factors that we have to take into account when we're designing, because ultimately we're designing for the consumers to purchase. We're not designing for our own benefit. This is for our clients to make money and for consumers to enjoy the product. So um, lots of stuff there that we have to pay attention to. And I'm sure everyone here and listening can imagine all the things you consider when you're in a store. Let's say you're at Target in the, the candy aisle and you're thinking, what do I want to buy today? Maybe it's your favorite candy or something new and exciting. So if you think of all those things, we really have to get a good grasp on all of those bits and pieces of the consumer experience.
Yeah, so the consumers are definitely kind of one end of the design process that you go through. On the other end, kind of I guess maybe on the idea end of we want to put whether it's M&Ms or something else
Mhm.
in a package. In the design process, can you talk about the kind of the creation or the birth of the ideas, and then how it progresses, and then also maybe where are you in that process?
Yeah, yeah. So I'll sort of, we call it like the life cycle of one of our products. I would say I'll walk you through that sort of thing. So yeah, how we work specifically, and I think we're a little bit unique to other companies, but I'll run through how we work. We've established a relationship with these clients that we work with, and there's a couple different ways we'll kick off a project. One might be that a client comes to us and says, "Hey, we have an opportunity where we see some potential for a $5 item to sell in a Walmart. It's going to be around, the Christmas holiday. What can you do for us that sort of fits this broad need?" Another way that we'll kick off a project is we know, based on our market research and understanding the consumer and understanding the whole packaging life cycle, we're able to kind of come up with some creative and smart ideas to be proactive and pitch to our clients. So we'll come to them and say, "Hey, we've been thinking in the background. We've got a couple of ideas. Can we share them with you?" So those are two sort of ways a project would kick off. But essentially, my team and I will, put our heads to paper and we'll do online research. We'll go head to the stores, see what's out there, understand the occasion so that in these, I don't know if I mentioned before that um, we do candy packaging, but something we specialize in specifically is seasonal. So those special items you see coming out during the holidays or, birthday specific candy items or all those kind of, we call them specialty items, is sort of our focus. So we'll start to understand what it is, that occasion, that we're designing around, make sure we feel like the experts, and we'll just start sketching. We'll start coming up with concepts based on what we've seen. And we'll get together and run sort of a full brainstorm. So that would be everyone gets to throw their ideas out in one big table, and we bring a bunch of samples and inspiration, and we kind of, put our heads together with, hey, what do we see some legs with? Where could we run with something here? And that's often the stage where we'll get, um, our engineers and our kind of back end people, the people who work with the client service people, so those who are in direct communication with our clients day to day. Um, Again, engineers, the people who build the lines and understand, like, well, this creative thing that you're coming up with, can we actually, is it possible? Can it be made? We'll bring the marketing folks in there, just a wide range of people who have great perspective. And we'll all just come up with some really fun and feasible ideas. And I'll sort of pause there just because, you know, I could go into some greater detail into what happens with design, but before I move forward with that, this big portion of our business is packaging and co-packing. So actually taking the candy and running it on how you would imagine, like, think Willy Wonka factory. We've got assembly lines and candy is being actually put into packaging, boxed up and put on a big pallet and sent on trucks out to Walmart and Target. So we have teams that are involved in that entire process, and we're just sort of the beginning phase. So when I mention those people that are coming to us during that brainstorm phase, that's all those people who have that insight. And something really unique for us as designers is we get to partner with those people. So we feel like we really are the experts in feasibility and what is possible and cost effective. So that's kind of how we start. Um, just a general project. Do you want me to go into some of
Mhm.
the things that we do in design, or do you have other?
What?
Go
Well,
for
one
it.
thing real quick, how long is that process typically if
Mm,
you're getting ready to release a specialty candy?
yeah.
Easter weekend is coming up, and then but give us an idea of how long that whole design process takes.
Yeah. So we call that sort of like our pipeline. So of course you have to design before day of. Typically what we our like rule of thumb, I would say, is we design on the season for the next season. So for instance, right around now, we're designing Easter concepts for 2021. So sort of that general rule of thumb is a year, which is quite wild. But if you think of all the moving parts in a process like this, you need that time to go back and forth and have every person who's involved in the project put their eyes on it and give approval and size and resize and round two, round three until it's perfect. But sometimes if we're going to be really strategic with our clients, we'll bring them in for a pipeline meeting and we'll set them up 3 to 5 years out. So we think about things that maybe we could knock out within a year because they're simple, they're cost effective, we could get right in. That will be like a 1 to 3 year project. 3 to 5 is something that's maybe a little more conceptual, and they'd have to do some work on their end. So yeah, I'd say most typically is a year. If we're proactive, it's 3 to 5 years out. But we often will get requests from clients that are in a pinch, and part of what we really pride ourselves in is the ability to kind of pick things up when you're in a rush, those projects that no one else can fulfill for you. So we've done sometimes we'll have projects that have 3 to 4 months before they have to pack out. And I know that feels like a lot of time, but really it's incredibly difficult to make it happen in that time. And I know
Could you
we
share?
actually. Oh,
Uh,
go for it.
no, go ahead, keep going. You're fine.
Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
No, I was just going to share a fun example of a pinch project, I would call it, is, and I think I've shared this with you in a prior conversation, but we had a project. Mars Wrigley came to us with their M&Ms, and they said, we really want to get our M&Ms in Packers, football Packers colors, and we want to have the packaging change during the playoffs. We want the packaging to change every week so that every week it has updated scores from the last game that they played. Um, so if you think about that, we have 1 week to turn around uh, art concept, put it on package, get it printed, get it shipped to our facility, get all of our M&Ms in. We have people on a line, within a 24-hour turnaround, packing these M&Ms in and shipping them out to local Walmarts and Targets and stuff. So that's probably our fastest timeline. We have if you think about it in terms of the games structure, it's a week between each one, but really we have a 24-hour turnaround for each project because we don't know the score until the game's over and we want to get it out the next day. So, we're really flexible on timeline. That's a really unique project and really a crazy cool process to see, with all hands on deck really
Yeah.
working that fast. It's really cool.
Could you share a story about when a customer comes to you and what they're thinking or what they plan just isn't feasible either from any points along the I forget the term that you used to describe it, the continuum from idea
Yeah.
to actually executing it.
Yeah. So we call it, and I don't know how familiar maybe other business types are with this term, but we use the word pipeline as sort of I would call it a timeline, but pipeline is sort of like what's coming down the stream, what do we see have our sights set on sometime in the future. So yeah, I'd say during that pipeline, if at any point something becomes unfeasible, well, I'd say let's back up. If a client comes to us with something that we know is going to be extremely difficult or frankly not feasible at all, um, first of all, we never want to say no. You
Mm.
always want to you want to A, have the business, B, have the relationship. So you want to say yes, but our strategy is sort of rather than giving a negative response. So rather than no or but, it's always, well, here's what we can do, without acknowledging that what they're saying is not feasible. Like, oh, we came up with this concept, which is getting pretty darn close to that brief you gave us. We think this would be cost effective. We think this would fit in your timeline. Thinking about sort of how can you pitch this in a way that's positive and exciting. So we'll always turn something around that fits somehow, some way into their box brief that they've provided us. So we try our best to just get something out there. If at any point on the timeline something becomes truly unfeasible, and I would say the most common factor that attributes to this would be cost. Um, we're working with giant clients with they're producing millions of units, and we're talking pennies for these projects. And if it for some reason the cost goes up by a penny, sometimes that's all it takes to call a project off. So sometimes we'll have gotten all the way through to basically we're ready to go. We're ready to pack. It's we've put a lot of time and investment, money and energy into a project, and the client can't make it work, so we have to pull the plug. And that's typical. I'd say that's something that I think all businesses experience, unplanned and unforeseen. I think we talked before too, like I try not to use the word failure just because um, I think it's always a learning opportunity for us. And I know that's cliche, but if you think about, what attributed to something making a project go up in price by a penny, like, well, what was that? What did we miss? How can we make sure that doesn't happen in the future so that next time we can really nail that down and have that under our belt to make sure it does work. So not failures, learning opportunities, but those learning opportunities are constant, and sometimes you know, they're sad. You don't, you want to see a project through, but it's the reality. It happens all the time, and you kind of just have to be reactive and do what you can.
Yeah, and as I mentioned before we were recording, we're it kind of in the middle of a quote unquote marketing unit right now,
Hmm.
as best we can replicate it. And we've spent a lot of time talking about the marketing mix and the four P's of marketing. And listening to you describe your job, I think it's a really interesting position because you really kind of touch on all four aspects of that mix. You're certainly involved in the product and all of the packaging. Uh,
Hmm.
Price is certainly a consideration as you're designing and determining the feasibility. The place, whether it's the actual physical store or where in the store is it going to be located, and then promotion. You gave some great examples. I'm interested if the I guess the business side of things. You obviously have the creative background. Did the
Right.
business side of things come from work experience? Did it come from taking classes, or where did that part
Yeah.
come from?
Yeah. So, a couple different places. I'd say my general answer would be experience in the workforce. I think it's really important to learn a lot about business. I mean, that is the world we live in today. But of course, you're never going to know exactly what that looks like until you're out there experiencing it and working with people and understanding your skill set and, really honing things in. So just, experience is the main factor. The other thing I would say is when I was in high school, I didn't take the opportunity to do any business classes, which is unfortunate. But I went to, and I don't think I mentioned this before. I went to college at SCAD, the Savannah College of Art and Design in Savannah, Georgia, um, and graduated there in 2016 and did the industrial design program throughout. Um, and part of what our university really focused on, considering it's an art school, is how do we create not starving artists? How do we make sure that these creatives aren't becoming the stereotype of, how do you make a living? What does an artist look like that is also a business person and successful? So I'd say every class we were taking, every project always had some spin in terms of like selling yourself, selling your work, um, understanding what it looks like in from a business perspective. Many of my colleagues were painters. How do you sell yourself and your work if you're out there doing it alone? Some of us are graphic designers or industrial designers who are going to work with a team. How do you build those types of relationships with your team and your clients and the people you're designing for? Um, so that was always something they put a focus on, and it always came from sort of a different angle. Um, you know, some of my favorite projects were ones that came from like a consumer perspective. So the actual project brief was pitched to us in sort of a crafty way to really put us in the mindset of the consumer. Um, one super creative, somewhat unique way of doing that. We had one project where, and we had no idea what we were doing, but we had to pick we had to write down on a note card um, someone that we wanted to make proud with our the work we've been doing at school, and um, someone who you sort of strive to impress. Maybe that's someone in your life, maybe that's someone who is famous, maybe that's someone sitting next to you. So we wrote those down, and by the end of the year, our capstone project was we had to give our presentation from that perspective and talk about why it is that I am sold on this design that this student has done. So for me, I had my dad, and I really had to do my whole senior project from this perspective of someone who is seeing my work, not from my own in it perspective. Um,
Mhm.
and I think that that's just an example of sort of the unique take that my school had on um, sort of that business personality or that business fluency. So yeah, I'd say a lot of experience, a lot of creative influences in my life that have given tidbits of, you know, how and what to do. And I do really think it also comes from knowing yourself and your skill set and how you can sort of for lack of a better phrase, capitalize on that. Um, so yeah, lots of
Yeah, I think
influences.
there's definitely a shift in focus on customer empathy and not just building something uh, that you think is going to work, but actually taking the time to think about
Absolutely.
what do your customers work. Um, just a couple more things. We've
Yeah.
got hopefully close to 100 students that are going to be listening in to this interview at some point. And obviously, they're consuming information in a whole new way, just like you and I are delivering information to them in a whole new way. Um,
Yeah.
outside of the current uniqueness of the situation, what some would be some general advice that you have to, again, mostly freshmen, sophomores that are potentially interested in pursuing business,
Pursuing business.
or
Yeah.
maybe not even business, but maybe just some general professional and career advice.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's great. Yeah, and as you mentioned, this sort of unique circumstance we find ourselves in. Um, a lot of it is, and again, this is totally from my perspective, but a lot of it's passion and drive and sort of an interest and want to learn and grow. I think, in these circumstances, me, for example, it's easy to get that extra hour of sleep and sleep in because no one's watching my back or clocking me in. I'm expected to sort of do it on my own. And I think, all these students that are watching are probably going to start to experience this when they head off to college, or rather after they graduate high school, sort of that accountability. Um, I'm doing this for myself. No one's holding me accountable or making sure that I'm doing this. I have to do it for myself. And I know for me, that drive to do that comes from a passion and excitement. And I know in high school, often you're taking gen eds or courses that maybe you're not entirely excited or thrilled to be participating in. But I think it's the perfect time to start exploring what it is that does get you excited. And, you know, again, thinking about your personal strengths and things you're interested in, like how can you start to, sort of a trial and error, like, let's try this out. Oh, that's not really my thing. Ooh, I find some interest here. Start to build that passion and excitement around the rest of your life, your career. And I think that that sort of goes hand in hand with that drive to, self accountability and sort of get it done attitude. And I think, you know, that's going to come with time, but now's a perfect sort of trial trial period to sort of just explore what it is that is exciting and you're ready to get up and start working on. So,
Yeah, I
yeah.
think there's definitely my message to many of the students was whenever we return to school as we knew prior, I hope that many of you look back at this time and say that you truly learned something. And maybe it's not necessarily related to what you were doing in your classes. Maybe you took time to learn about that one thing that you're interested in.
Yeah.
You wanted to watch that one documentary about an event or something like that.
Yeah. And I think
Me being,
also, I think that sort of relates to, yeah, I think like I think was I saying this out loud? Mind me if I wasn't. But we were talking about sort of this idea of quote unquote failures or learning opportunities. I think in my business realm, it's sort of connected to this idea now of like, hopefully you take these opportunities to do something that's new or different, and it's a learning process, but don't not take a learning opportunity because you think you're not going to like it. I think you'll honestly probably learn more from something you realize you don't love, or find out you don't have an interest in, than just nailing something you do. I think it's part of a self exploration. I think taking the opportunity to learn, like you're talking about now, try
yeah.
that new documentary, look, you know just explore. Why not?
Yeah. Well,
Learn a lot.
hopefully our students are out there and they take this to heart. Jordan,
Yeah.
that's all the questions I have. If you have any
Cool.
closing thoughts or comments that you'd like to share before we wrap things up.
Well, I'd say, and I know I've shared this with your classes before, but just for any of those creatives that are out there listening to this, and really, I'd say, anyone listening to this, one of the best pieces of advice that I could give is to save all your work, keep all of your work. I think, especially now in this digital age, obviously we're doing this virtually. You have the access to be able to save stuff and keep a portfolio, or keep, all of your projects. I think it's really cool to look back on the work you've done and see your progression and see that exploration sort of on paper. We're talking about this whole trial and error, trying things you like, trying things you don't. I think there's some value in being able to recall that and recognize some of your growth. Um, I also think, something that I didn't take seriously when I was in high school was, yeah, just specifically in art, making sure that I was building a portfolio and keeping track of my work. And that's something that maybe I wasn't excited to share back then. I was a little self-conscious about my art, but now, I really wish I had something to share, that because I feel like I've gained a sense of pride around the work that I've done. And I really wish I had something to, share with my friends and my family. And I think that there's a lot of value in sort of seeing that timeline. I think, handful of years back, people kept their printed photographs. Like now we have computers. Like, keep your documents, keep your artwork, keep it, store all your stuff. It's fun to look back on. Um,
Great.
but yeah, I'd say that's sort of like a more of a personal piece of advice. And I think, again, just a professional development sort of tip. It's nice to recognize your growth by looking back at what you've done in the past. And yeah.
Nice. That's great to hear. Well, thanks
Yeah,
again, Jordan, for taking the time. I know
totally.
you're like many of us are adjusting to a new work environment, so we appreciate you taking the
Yeah.
time to share some things with our students.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope they learned something new.
Yes.
Topic
All
of
right. Thank
conversation
you.
today. Thank
That's
you.
right. All right.
Yeah.